But we begin tonight in the Trump world of alternative facts, where the twice impeached, 4 times indicted former president and his allies continue to believe that if they just say something enough times, then somehow, poof, it becomes true. Case in point, Rudy Giuliani, who is in the second day of his civil trial to determine the amount of damages he'll have to pay to 2 Georgia election workers he defamed after the 2020 election. Even though he's already been found liable for defamation, Giuliani has continued to claim that he was telling the truth.
Whatever happened to them, it's unfortunate if other people overreacted, but everything I said about them is true.
Do you regret what you did to Rudy?
Of course I don't regret it. I told the truth.
Wow, perhaps Rudy's own lawyer didn't get the memo about that alternative fact, considering that it directly contradicted what that lawyer was saying in court, calling the 2 election workers good people who did not deserve what happened to them. And today, one of those election workers, Shaye Moss, provided dramatic testimony on how Giuliani's false allegations forever changed her life. Fighting back tears at several points during her testimony, Moss described the relentless harassment and fear of violence directed at her and her loved ones. Quote, "I was afraid for my life. I literally felt like someone was going to come and attempt to hang me, and there's nothing that anyone would be able to do about it." Donald Trump also tried to create his own alternative fact today about why he declined to testify yesterday in his New York civil fraud trial. After claiming over the weekend that he had nothing more to say, today Trump posted that he did, in fact, want to testify, but could not do so fully because of the gag order in the case. Now, remember, the gag order in this case only prohibits Trump from making statements about the judge's law clerk who cannot defend herself. Why that was pivotal to Trump testifying is as confusing to me as why anyone paid money to attend Trump University. And today, Trump is also facing questions about one of his criminal trials, the classified documents case in Florida, which we all know he will never face as it is being overseen by the Trump-friendly judge Aileen Cannon. CNN is reporting on the repeated attempts by Trump and his associates to cozy up to a longtime former Mar-a-Lago employee who quit after the FBI searched the resort last summer and before charges against Trump were filed. According to CNN, this employee was also a witness to several of the episodes special counsel Jack Smith included in his federal criminal indictment. Quote, "He had moved several boxes for Trump and was also privy to conversations referenced in the indictment between Trump and his 2 co-defendants, Mar-a-Lago property manager Carlos de Oliveira and Trump's body man Walt Nauta, putting the former employee in a unique group of Mar-a-Lago staffers who could be in a position to provide valuable information to investigators. The outreach included a direct call from Trump, as well as offers to pay for his legal representation, complimentary tickets to a golf tournament, and reminders that he could get his job back if he wanted it." Joining me now is Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal analyst, and Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Thank you for being here, both of you. Here's the story, the CNN story. It is, Lisa, quite a tale. And what struck me was the sort of persistence, let's just say, of de Oliveira in particular in going at this employee multiple times, showing up at, parties and events with them, inviting them to come back and work for Trump, and saying, no, let people around Trump saying, let us get your lawyer. Is that witness intimidation?
Joy, that's a hard question to answer. It's certainly on the border of witness intimidation. The other thing that I think shouldn't be neglected here is that the person is indeed a witness. And when you compare CNN's reporting today with previous reporting by the New York Times in September about another former employee repeatedly contacted with respect to offers of attorneys, for example, or you even compare it to the indictment in this case where someone who goes by Trump Employee 5 seems to have a lot in common with the subject of CNN's reporting, it's pretty clear that the person who is implicated in CNN's reporting is not just a casual witness, but somebody who might be at the very center of the case that the special counsel's office would hope to put on if and when this case goes to trial.
Right. And Glenn, I mean, because the thing is, I don't understand Walt Nauta. I'll be honest with you. These are low-level low-level people. I don't know how much he's paying them, but they seem to be proactively acting to try to make sure that everyone stays on side, that everyone stays in Trump's good graces, and that they stay in the camp. I don't see how that necessarily hurts Trump, but it seems to me that people like Walt Nauta are in so much legal jeopardy. You know, it's more likely he'll go to jail than Trump in this case. Can you make sense of them trying to seemingly pressure another witness to, I don't know, act in Trump's behalf the way they are?
I can, Joy. When I handled large RICO cases in the courts of Washington, D.C., we had any number of defendants who were part of the criminal organization, the enterprise that we were prosecuting. And no matter what we tried to do, no matter how much we tried to appeal to, the very real probability that they might go to prison for the rest of their lives if they opted not to cooperate with the prosecutors and testify against the bigger fish, many of them continued to hold fast. In fact, Joyce, some of them walked into court and took what are called soldier pleas. A soldier plea is somebody who is so entrenched and devoted to the criminal organization and the head of the criminal organization that they will plead guilty to every count in the indictment without any benefit because they're not willing to cross the boss. That is what it feels like is going on here with the Walt Nautas and perhaps others who will forever remain loyal to Donald Trump. And that's fine because Jack Smith has enough other evidence to prove these charges beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right, and that judge has no loyalty to them. She may try to stop Trump from going to trial, but she's not going to stop them. They'll go to prison. Let's go to Rudy Giuliani. Speaking of people who seem to be wanting to bring on more legal problems than they already had, here's what Politico writes. They may have defamed them again, these Shaye Moss and her mom. When the trial reconvened on Tuesday morning, an incredulous Judge House said the comments that he made saying, I didn't lie, I told the truth about these two women, could support another defamation claim. I'm not sure how it's reconcilable, Giuliani's lawyer acknowledged. This has taken a bit of a toll on him. He's almost 80 years old. There are health concerns, Mr. Giuliani. So, Lisa Rubin, you're saying he's old and he has health concerns? I mean, he's younger than Joe Biden. He's younger than, Is that a way to get out of a defamation-free card? He's old and not well?
No, particularly whereas here the liability has already been established. This is a trial, Joy, as you know, that's for damages only because Rudy Giuliani already has a liability judgment against him. But the other thing that I would add is continuing to defame someone after you've had that liability adjudicated. That can be part and parcel of a damages award, particularly a punitive damages award. So if you've been told you already defamed someone and you continue to spew the same lies, a court is fully entitled to consider that in awarding the quantum of punitive damages. Indeed, Donald Trump himself may face the same situation in the second E. Jean Carroll trial that opens in January.
Yeah, and let me just read to you from the Washington Post that the attacks on these election workers. Many messages called Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss traitors. Others said they should be hanged from trees close enough to the U.S. Capitol for people to hear their necks snap. Another message was from a person who just repeated the N-word at least 11 times. The only argument that we're hearing from the other side, Glenn, is that it will ruin Giuliani financially if he gets a big fine. Again, so what? These women were subjected to death threats.
Not only so what, but so be it. He should be financially ruined because I was taken aback, even knowing who Rudy Giuliani is and how he has behaved in recent years on the courthouse steps at the end of the court session yesterday. He defamed them again. He said that, oh, no, it is true that they were involved in changing votes. His word. This is like somebody who is on trial for robbery, committing a robbery on his way into his trial. I mean, it is insane. And his lawyer may have said he's 80 and I can't control everything he does. But you know what? Rudy Giuliani can control what he does. He chooses not to. He doubles down on his racism and his defamation and putting these women's lives in jeopardy. And I would just press play on that clip from yesterday for this jury and say, ladies and gentlemen, in case you ever thought Rudy Giuliani would learn his lesson, watch what he said yesterday. As Lisa said, I think that is relevant to not only the defamation issue generally, but to the damages.
Let's go real quick to the D.C. case. There's so many cases, so little time. The special counsel is going to use Trump's phone. So his phone data, I'm going to stay with you for a second, Glenn. The data from his phone could reveal day-to-day details of his final weeks in office, including his daily movements, his Twitter habits, and any aides who had access to his accounts and devices. If Trump didn't tweet, it's going to be wild himself. Does that help him in some way?
Yeah, I mean, that is why, you don't just rely on media accounts that Donald Trump tweeted, for example, come to D.C. on January 6th will be wild, or mid-attack on the Capitol that Donald Trump tweeted Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what he should have done. The message there, Joy, was clear. Get him. And his foot soldiers erupted into chants of hang Mike Pence, which was kind of okay with Donald Trump, according to witnesses.